Hello, everybody, and welcome to number 3, this Kind July conversation with the transgender advocate and activist, Katherine Wolfgramme. I'm so delighted to be here with you all, and I'm in lockdown. I know there's a few of us in this chat and around the country who are in lockdown. I hope you're doing okay. And before I bring Katherine on, I just wanted to let you know that we have a chat tab and we have a Q&A tab. And I want you to talk to us as we're having this conversation. Tell me where you're dialing in from. Tell me how you're doing, if there's anything you want to contribute. And the Q&A tab will be for our questions. You can submit any question you like. And when we come to about the 7:30 mark, that's about in 30 minutes, I will put those questions to Katherine. So without further ado, Katherine Wolfgramme, welcome. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Julie. Thank you so much. I feel very welcomed on this cold winter's night.
Yeah. Well, I didn't introduce myself right at the beginning. I'm Jane Hutchin, and it's great to be with you, Katherine. I know you've had a little bit of technical issue, but we are all good to go. Katherine, you look wonderful and you look really happy. A lot of us look that way at the moment. Let me ask you, how are you really?
Well, I'm good. Inside, I'm good. Of course, we live in this very uncertain time and nothing really is certain. So there's that underlying worry, I suppose, for not just for my future, but for our future going forward. And I'm just bracing down and hoping for the best.
Katherine, I wonder, when in your life have you thought most deeply about kindness?
Well, kindness is I've had it since you've asked me to join this conversation. I've had a really, really good think about what kindness is and what it means to me. I was raised by my great grandparents, and in the 1930s and 1940s, they were actually missionaries. And my great grandfather was a church pastor, and my great grandmother was a school teacher. And I always, in Melbourne, growing up, I was really annoyed by how they were. I always thought they were too nice and everyone was just taking advantage of them. But now that I've grown up, I just realized that they were extremely, extremely kind people.
Wow.
And they were always, very generous of spirit and generous of emotion, and they were just very kind. And I was very fortunate to have grown up that way. Sometimes, you don't think about these things until they're gone. And I wish they were alive so I could, tell them, I'm sorry I was so annoyed by your kindness. But I think that's where kindness started for me, because, of course, charity was something. It literally began in the home. I was raised to give from a very young age, and that was to the church, and to, I was on 40-hour famines as a child. Do you remember that, for the Ethiopian kids, and doing all those things. So I've always grown up with a social conscience.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, I think you were actually born in Fiji. As a small kid, you had, and we're talking in the 70s, you had gender dysphoria. What is gender dysphoria? Tell me briefly.
Okay, well, gender means gender identity. So that's not sexuality. That's the gender that you are. That's male or female. And I was born male, and I had gender dysphoria. So dysphoria means to have fear of. It's worse than fear, dread. So if you can imagine euphoria, dysphoria is exactly the opposite to that. So I actually had gender dysphoria. So I had a dread towards my gender. and how you feel when you're young. I was 4 or 5 years old, and I didn't think then that I thought, oh, I think I'll be a girl. I found out that I wasn't a girl
Wow.
when I was 4 or 5 years old. So that was really very difficult.
Did
It
that,
was a very,
did it come as
um,
a shock to you?
yeah, it was a shock. All I can say is the lights went out and I suddenly felt trapped and unhappy. And um, that was how I felt until I was able to transition, which was many, many, many years later. And, in the 1970s in Australia, I also had to deal with racism,
Mm.
as well as being gender disorder, because I'm wired differently. It's in my brain wiring. So when I was a child, I walked differently, I spoke differently, and it's very easy to identify transgender children now because, they are genuinely different to normal kids.
So, were you able to talk to anybody about this? I mean, did you talk to your parents about this feeling that you were
They did.
shocked that you were a boy?
Well, I did try to tell people,
What
but
happened?
well, I was a. um, I met the wooden spoon a couple of times, and then I decided I should just shush.
Wow.
That it was best not to say anything at all. Um, yes, it was but you can tell your brain anything, but your brain does what it wants. So it was not, I couldn't brainwash myself to be any different to how I am. Um, and, but for my family, they just didn't understand what gender, they thought if I prayed about it, if they punished me more,
Mm.
if they did these things, that I would change. And of course I didn't, because it was in my wiring.
But you just kept quiet about it, which must have been so damaging.
Oh yeah, well, I sort of kept quiet. I didn't. I just acted as myself.
Catherine, I've
Um,
often heard people around me say things when they hear that there are trans children perhaps in a school setting. They say things like, what if it's just a phase? How do you
hmm.
respond to that?
Well, it's a very lazy answer. You know, um, people think that homosexuality is a phase. That's what they thought is, and that was the excuse. But um, I am the living testament. I transitioned 30 years ago.
Wow.
Um, as soon as well, 31 years ago, nearly, as soon as I was legal and no one could stop me,
Right.
I ran away from home. Um, but the thing now is that kids don't have to run away from home because parents have technology and access to information, um, to support them to keep their kids at home. And I think that's really important, because you've got to remember, the reason why there is such a high suicide rate for transgender people is because they have no roots. It's the roots that keep us stable. Without roots, it's easy to be homeless. It's easy to be vulnerable. It's easy to be exploited. But if you have roots, if you have home and you have family, um, the suicide rate drops dramatically. And in the transgender population, it's roughly 33% per capita of people will kill themselves um, by the time they reach adulthood. And that's a really scary statistic when you think that per capita is 1.7 in men, and I think less than a percent in women. um, and then you look at 35% in transgender people. It's actually shocking.
Absolutely.
um, and I think that transgender people, we have a right to live. And we don't just have a right to live. I think that we have a right to be happy too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, and that's up to our environments to allow us to be happy. You know, we're not out, you know, and that's the other problem as well. People think that things like transgender is a contagious disease, and it's
Mm.
not contagious. It's just that now kids actually feel safe in their homes and feel safe in their environments, that they're actually coming forward and telling people how they feel rather than holding it in like I did and being the
Katherine,
unhappiest child in the world. That they have a chance at happiness, and I would dearly love to give that to them.
thank you. We're getting lots of people joining in on the chat. We've got people from Potts Point in Sydney, lots of people from Sydney and Melbourne saying hello to us. So we welcome everybody who's joined our chat. I'd like to read out a list to you, Katherine. So I started this list. I borrowed it from a guy called Leo Balbauta, I think it was, who has a blog called Zen Habits. And I've kind of massaged it, and I've had all of our guests add to it as we've gone along. So I'm going to read out what we've got so far. The list started off with this is how we treat people with kindness. I've got be friendly, be helpful, listen, stop criticizing, don't control others, rise above retaliation. One of my personal favorites is be courteous in traffic. Mrs. Governor General, that's Linda Hurley, said, just say hello. The Governor General, he gets 2. He said, be slow to judge and be considerate of others. And Grace Tame added, be patient. And last week, Eddie Wu added the importance of forgiveness. So what would your contribution to the kindness list be?
Well, mine would be current. We all live and face a time of isolation. So I think that we need to be generous with our time. And when I say generous with our time, I don't mean like, you know, donate all your time. I mean, have the time to stop and say thank you to that person serving you, because they're risking their health serving you. You know, and stop, and you know, if someone's talking to you, don't cut them off, let them finish. You might be the only person they've spoken to all day. And also, you know, have the grace to listen, and have the grace to answer them back. I think isolation is a dangerous situation, especially for mental health, I think, and amongst older people who are genuinely already isolated, living by themselves. You know, an act of kindness and seeing them, I think, would really help. And also to young people, you know, this is not natural for young people to be isolated, you know, and they deserve some time too. And yeah.
Katherine, I'm going to continue on with your story. And again, if I put my foot in it and I say something that's clumsy, I want to apologize ahead of time, but I also want you to correct me, because I know language is a really big thing with you. You know,
Don't worry. Don't worry, I'll say something.
did you want to be different?
No, 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 no. Do you know what my dream was when I was young?
What?
I just wanted to be a housewife. I just wanted to be a housewife, cook for someone, clean for someone to love, you know. And I've been everything else virtually. And I'm still haven't been a housewife. So yeah, the an ordinary life was not mapped out for me in the stars, I'm afraid. But that's okay. I've come to accept that now. I knew that if I came I was living in the country in Daylesford until about 6 years ago, and I knew that if I came back to Sydney, that this would be my destiny. I'd be talking and advocating and you know, fighting for trans rights and things like that. And I'm happy with my lot now. You know, I've come to accept this is it. This is what I'm meant to do.
Well, we are so glad that you do what you do. Katherine, as we look around ourselves today, you'd have to say that trans people are much more visible than a decade ago, and certainly when you were beginning your transition. I think there's even been a trans person's been nominated for an Emmy nomination. I wonder, how did events like that, when somebody in the limelight either comes out as trans or succeeds in a sort of non-trans world, does that affect the state of the world in terms of, you know, does transphobia go down? Does understanding go up? What does it do?
It brings, you know, because transgender people were illegal once, and religiously they were forced to live way on the fringes of society. Transgender people were a taboo subject. No one ever spoke about it, and it was something weird, and no, you know, it was like a taboo. It wasn't really until Caitlyn Jenner came out, you know, it took a Kardashian to bring the conversation into every household across the Western world. And once Caitlyn came out and her journey was televised, and the people around her explained to her the problems and issues that trans people had, it suddenly became a conversation that people felt comfortable talking about in their lounge rooms and across the dinner table. Whereas before it was never spoken of. And unfortunately, when something's not spoken about, you're not considered quite human. I grew up being objectified most of my life. I'm more of a, you know, an object of fascination.
Really?
Rather than, yeah.
Can you give me an example?
Well, you know, strangers would do things to me that they would never do to another stranger.
Like what?
Like touch my face to see if it was real, or touch my boobs to see if it was real.
Really?
Yeah, they're like total strangers. Men and women would feel easily enough to be able to touch my boobs and go, oh, they feel real, don't they? And, you know, it was normal. People did that all the time. But now looking back, I realized that that would be called sexual assault.
Yeah.
You know, and the questions that people would ask, they were extraordinarily personal questions. And so now I say to people, look, how you speak to a transgender person is exactly how you would speak to anybody else. So if it's too rude to ask the woman you just met up the road, then it's too rude to ask her or him. You know, it's just, it's about humanity and feelings. And I think the more trans people who come forward and join a conversation about trans visibility and acceptance of trans people, it actually adds another facet to our humanity, and our who we are. You know, and because it's new to all of you, but you've got to remember it's new to all of us too. You know, we're not used to talking about ourselves
in such a personal way.
Yeah, and and I don't think everyone should. You know, I think it's good that some of us will come forward and we will talk to you and tell you things because we're comfortable to do so. But I don't think it's really polite. I think it's really naff to be asking trans people questions all the time because they just want to get on with life and they want to enjoy their happy life and just have some peace. You know, they've transitioned, they've left their unhappiness behind them to follow a life of fulfillment and happiness, and they just want to live that. They don't want to go over and over and talk about their past and things like that. I don't mind. It's what I do. And plus my journey is quite late. It's like 30 years later. I'm far more comfortable talking to you about things than I would have been 30 years ago.
That's a really important point that you make there, that, pointing out differences and constantly wanting to maybe get into the lives of a trans person is really a bit of a breach of privacy. And thank you for saying what you've said, because, that teaches us all a bit to just, we might be curious about trans people, but we've also got to remember that they're just another person trying to get on with their everyday life. Can you explain for us, why is there a conversation at the moment around pronouns?
Well, misgendering, I know from experience, from many years of experience, that people can be extremely rude by accidentally giving you the wrong pronoun. I remember I was at the British Embassy in Paris 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to London, and the guy said, "Oh, yes, excuse me, sir." And I looked at him and I said, "You can't say that." And he said, "Oh, I'm perfectly within my," and because he intentionally was misgendered me to be rude to me, to make whatever point he was trying to make, but I put up with that which is ironic, I can tell you now, when I was a kid, before I transitioned, they used to call me a big girl. "Oh, you're a big girl, you're nothing but a girl, you're just a big," and as soon as I transitioned, they started calling me a bloke. There is some great irony to that.
There is indeed.
So, and it's, and I think a lot of it's common sense. If a trans woman is dressed as a woman, of course her pronoun is she. Why would her pronoun be he, unless you're intentionally being cruel? And that's it's a quick way to make someone miserable.
Absolutely. Katherine, what do you think is at the root of transphobia?
Fear of the unknown. So, we all fear things. We fear COVID. That guy that didn't wear a mask in that hardware shop the other day, and someone spat at him for not wearing a mask, and I think Gladys said, "That's not on." Don't do. But that guy that was abusive, he acted out of fear, and we fear things we don't understand. I can't force someone not to be scared of me. That's like telling someone that's scared of spiders not to be scared of spiders. It's just, but I can tell that person to be nice to spiders, and maybe I shouldn't use a spider as there. Maybe I should use a lamb, but it's the same thing, so I don't mind if you're transphobic, but if you don't serve me just like you've served everybody else, I will whoop your ass, I will take you to court, and you will be sorry. And that's I think that's the difference, yeah.
So is taking people to court, is that the best way to get change to happen?
Laws change in court. That's how laws change. If there's no other avenue, that's the only way to go. Like if someone's been asked for 12 years to do something, by numerous people from the transgender community, then I see no other option. I'm not going to ask them. They've been asked enough. I will take them to court. I'll take legal action. And sometimes with legal action, you can't even talk about it. When you go in front of the Anti-Discrimination Board or the places like that, a part of the conciliation is what's that word where you've got to keep your trap shut?
A gag order.
Not a gag order. Well, yeah, a gag order, but there's another word where you don't, where it's private. And you're not allowed to say how things came to happen, So yeah, a lot of things happen that way.
Okay.
And I'm not scared, and the legal world is very supportive of community rights too, and they will often support you in your plight if it's a community, if it's something that will affect your community.
Okay. Well, I've just cast my eyes at the clock, and we've got about 4 minutes to go in our formal discussion. And I would, at this point, ask for our wonderful audience if they would like to submit questions in the Q&A tab. So get those questions coming in, please. And I've got a few more things to ask you, Katherine. I'm going back to some kindness questions. And I wonder, do you have a favorite philosophy or affirmation about kindness that you'd like to share?
Yeah. Do what you can for as many as you can for as long as you can.
I like it.
Well, I wanted that to be my motto. I sort of looked it up in Latin, but it was too long. And, because, sometimes with Latin, there's 2 words and it makes up 4 sentences.
Yes.
Yeah. So if anyone out there knows any Latin, can you sort of give me 2 words that mean that?
Okay, we'll get someone working on that for you. I wonder what kind of situations really challenge your desire to stay kind?
Look, I grew up in a community that was, faced great discrimination. I'm talking about the LGBT community, and I'm talking about the Sydney LGBT community. And we gathered in great numbers for strength and for support. And, we've always been kind. I think it's because the world showed us great unkindness, So as a general rule, I don't really know any unkind gay people. I know bitchy ones, but I don't know any truly unkind ones. And I think because I posted Stay Kind to a activist page, an LGBT activist page, and they said, "Oh, so we've got to limit ourselves to 1 kind act a day." And I thought about it, and I thought, well, that's true. Like we are, our community is extraordinarily kind to each other.
Yeah, but is there something that challenges you?
To be kind?
No, that stops you from staying kind, because it's something that really gets your go-to.
Well, I think unkindness should always be held to accountability.
Yeah.
And sometimes to hold that person's unkindness to accountability, there is a certain amount of, unkindness, ruthlessness. I don't know what it's called, but, you have to be steely at times when you're faced with unkindness. But I like being kind. It actually feels good.
Yes.
It makes me feel mushy inside, and it makes me happy, and and I personally enjoy it. So it's and I think it's really good. But I think what Kind July is to me is an act of kindness to random strangers, and that's and you know, like acts of kindness like that, I think are valuable, and they're infectious too, because that person will go on and be kind to someone else because you put them in a good mood. um, and you know, a lot of people remember kindness, which
Absolutely.
I think, yeah, and I think that's kind of sad. You know, if someone remembers you being kind to them 20 years ago, it makes me think, how many people were unkind to that person? um,
Well, it
you
could
know, so
also be something that's a bit out of the ordinary that, you know, you remember as being special. So that could be a positive thing too.
yeah, but sometimes you don't know you're being kind as well, you
That's
know.
very true. That's very
um,
true.
and you know, you don't realize the repercussions. Oh well, here's a start. I remember I met this boy. He was underage. He ran away from home because he was gay. This was years and years ago. And he said, "Oh yeah." And I said to him, I said, "But," I said, "well," I said, "if I was you, I'd go back home, and I'd go back to school, and I would get an education, and you know, just and then do whatever you liked." And I never saw him again until many years later. And then one day he said to me, he goes, "You changed my life."
Wow.
He said, "When I ran away from home and you told me to go back
Mm.
home," he said, "I'm the editor of a magazine now, lifestyle, but I'm not, no names mentioned, don't worry." but but you know, like you, I didn't know I was being kind.
Yeah.
You know, I was just sort of just telling him how it was. And but even, you know, and that's the thing. I think if you do acts of kindness, you shouldn't count your kindnesses too. I think, you know,
Okay.
you should just, yeah, don't count them, just do them. I think if you hold them up and say, "Oh, look, I did this," it's sort of like, oh, you know, it shouldn't be something to have a medal for.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Katherine, I've enjoyed this conversation so much. We are not finished by any means, but I'm going to now go to some of the questions on the Q&A tab. Thank you, everybody, for contributing these fantastic questions. I'm going to start with one from Annie, who says, "Hi, Katherine. What simple advice would you give someone in the community in terms of kindness and inclusion when you meet a person who has identified publicly as trans? To treat everybody the same." That's interesting.
Well, you know, treat them as you would treat anybody else. I'm sure they don't want to be treated any different. You know, if they've transitioned to be a girl, just let them be girls, and just, you know, carry on. And just, you know, you don't have to. I personally don't think trans people need to be treated special.
Mm,
I think we just need to be treated normal, you know,
okay.
and 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 just let her carry on, and let him carry on or her carry on. She's made a big step. That person's made a huge step. They've, you know, they've come out and they've openly told you that, but they've only openly told you that so they can be free.
Mm,
You know, so they can be free to be them, and they want to enjoy that freedom. So I think they shouldn't be imprisoned in a personality type or anything like that. Just let them be free. Um, you know, I saw a great meme. It said, you know, if you see someone at the supermarket and you don't know what gender you are, follow these steps. And it goes dot, dot, dot. It says, mind your own business, do nothing. And it's true, you know, just do nothing. Just let
that's
them
great.
be, let them live. Yeah.
That's great.
You know.
Okay, another question. What would you say is common unkindness for a trans person that the broader community may not be aware of but should be?
Unkindness.
Yeah, that
Well,
we're not aware of.
you know, I think, you know, staring, you know, staring is a thing. Not looking is another thing. Isn't that a strange in between thing? You know how you told not to look at things, don't stare, it's rude.
Mm,
But and then so if everyone doesn't look at you, you can feel just as isolated as if everyone's staring at
wow,
you.
yeah.
So it's food for thought. That's why I say just treat them as normal. Um, with unkindness, that goes back also to misgendering. You know, misgendering is most unkind.
Absolutely. Yes.
Um,
Oh, have you? Sorry, did you have more to say? I was going to keep reading my
yeah,
questions.
well, also too, you know, discrimination is most unkind.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you know, and I think also, like, we've got to remember that not just trans people, all of us, we are all on an individual journey. And none of us know what the other people think, you know, unless you're a wonderful mind reader, you know, psychic. You just don't know what other people are thinking. You don't know how they feel, you know, and you have to bear that in mind when you're around people. And not everyone's strong, you know. Some people are emotionally and physically weak, and you have to have the grace to remember that, you
Okay.
know.
We've got quite a lot of questions coming in, so
Okay,
we might
sorry.
need to move. I just want to make sure that we don't leave anyone out. This is a
Sure.
great question from Matthew. How can we be kinder to friends who are transitioning?
Ask them how they are,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
like, are you okay?
Mm,
How do you feel? When you say you feel that, how do you mean?
wow.
You know, and give them an opportunity to, you know, if they want to do that, you know. But I mean, I know if it's a girl transitioning, buy them some ice cream and chocolate. Nothing tastes better than ice cream and chocolate on hormones. Trust me.
I love that. So we have one from Jonathan. Despite the unkindness and difficulties Katherine has faced, how has she remained so strong and kind?
Well, you know, I think, well, you know, I've faced many difficulties and I've faced many hardships, but I've actually always been happy because I'm Katherine. I'm who I am inside, and that fulfills me and that makes me extraordinarily happy. Um, you know, and I think it goes. I think, you know, my great grandparents who raised me. I know they're watching, and I know they would be very unhappy if I was unkind. And I can be unkind, though, don't get me wrong, I'm no saint. Um, but it also takes a lot more energy to be unkind. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I can't understand why people would waste so much energy being nasty and cruel. And because it takes a lot, you've got to premeditate all that stuff.
Mm,
You know, where you don't even have to think when you're being kind. You know, it's just within you, and it's just a part of you. I think it's fear. I think good people are often very scared to show how kind they are because they think it's a sign of weakness. Um, and because I'm very strong, you know, willed, and I'm very, I know exactly who I am. I feel safe enough to be kind. Um,
I like that.
you know, I think, yeah.
What is an example? This is from Colleen. What is an example that you've experienced of someone being kind to you that you actually were not expecting?
Oh, there have been many kindnesses over the years. You know, there have been many angels. Very, very much. I would not be alive today if it wasn't for the kindness of strangers. Um, you know, and um,
Is there an
there's,
example you can bring us?
um, gosh, um, an example. There are just so many to pick.
Of a
There are so many
life-saving
to choose from.
kindness.
Like on a historically, um, you know, I could have been homeless many times over the years, and you know, and I'd meet people out and about, and they would give me shelter, and they would take me in, and you know, and there were other people that, yeah, that's going, maybe that's too historical. I'll let me think of something recent that uh, so I have a friend here in Potts Point. I live in Potts Point. So hello to everyone that's tuned in from Potts Point. the she's, yeah, she has a boutique here in Potts Point, and she has encouraged me to make flower crowns and head ornaments during COVID, during this time, to keep my brain busy so that I don't fall into depression and isolation. And she calls me and she asks me how they're going, and we talk about how we're going to do the shop and things like that. I think that's an act of kindness, because she doesn't actually, I mean, no, she loves the idea of having the flower crowns and everything, but just the encouragement and everything else that she's doing, I know that she's doing that to make sure that that I'm not alone during this
Yeah,
time, and that's very kind.
that you're in a good headspace. Here's
Yeah.
a lovely question from Annie. Katherine, your journey to trans was later in your life. Is there anything that you would have done differently in relation to how you educate people around you about this journey?
Well, yes, and I did try to talk about, when transgender is a really broad umbrella. Now it also includes people who cross dress, who are non-binary, who are also all different types of gender diversity is crammed into the trans umbrella. And I was constantly insulting non-binary people. They felt that I wasn't explaining it properly. They felt that I wasn't saying the right thing. There'd always be a complaint that they felt misrepresented. And of course they did. I'm not non-binary, and they needed someone to speak for themselves. So I actually stopped talking about non-binary people, and I just talk about binary transgender people, people that are like me, who have transitioned from one gender to another.
Can you explain briefly what non-binary is?
I'll see, but this is where I get into trouble.
Oh, okay. Well, we better not, because we've
So,
only got a couple minutes.
no, it's all right. It's non-binary. It's I think it's a non-gender specific. So their
That's
pronouns
perfect.
are they, them. Yeah. So, but Google it, probably best. Then I won't get into trouble.
Fantastic. Do you know any good organisations in Australia that support transgender people?
Yes. The Gender Centre in New South Wales is the oldest transgender support organisation in the world. It's been going for 40 years, I think.
Wow.
And, it takes care of welfare from transition to housing for people that are living rough, because trans homelessness is an issue, and medical needs and health. There's also ACON have only just started a trans service as well, and
ACON.
ACON, but the Gender Centre is the first one that I would
Okay.
go to. And in Melbourne, I think I've forgotten the name,
Okay.
but it's but they have a hub, like a centre. It's like a rainbow centre or something in Melbourne.
Okay. People might be able
But the
to
Gender
Google
Centre
that
has
too.
all of that. Yeah. So
Okay.
if you go, all the information and everything is there. Contact information for nationally. Yeah.
Okay. I've got a very, very quick question and answer for you. What acts of kindness do you feel would assist with improved community inclusivity for any minority group?
Be involved.
Wow. Okay.
I lived in a country town, and I could have been isolated, but I joined the food bank, and I joined all different charities. I was on the board of the op shop, and I did all different things. And and when you're involved doing community work, you meet people within the community, and and as a group of people, you're doing acts of kindness. So
Fantastic.
so engage with. Don't wait for community to engage with you. It's important to engage with community.
Wow.
Yeah.
Katherine, this has been such a joyous 45 minutes talking to you. You've taught me so much about trans issues and kindness as well. And we just want to thank you from Stay Kind for being brave enough and courageous enough to stand up and do what you do. Thank you so much. And to all our wonderful audience and your fabulous questions, we really appreciate those. And just a reminder, we have 2 more Kind July conversations left. Only 2. Next week we have singer Dami Im. So that is something I'm truly looking forward to. I hope you'll all join us for a bit of rest, recuperation, and replenishment. Katherine, have a lovely evening, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for tuning in, and thank you for listening, everybody. Stay kind. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.